Hello, good morning children. Today in this video I am going to explain class 7th history 4th chapter the Mughal Empire part 4. Okay, in the previous video I have explained about this Akbarnama. Akbar asked his friend Abul Fazl to write the Akbarnama and the 3-volume book. The first part deals with Akbar's ancestors and the second volume the Akbar's reign and the third volume Ain-e-Akbari and this administration, household, army, the revenues and the geography of his empire. Now let's see why he has asked his friend to write about his reign. What were the policies he has adopted and made him a successful ruler? Let's see. The broad features of administration were laid down by Akbar and were elaborately discussed by Abul Fazl in his book the Akbarnama, in particular in its last volume the Ain-e-Akbari. This is about the third volume about the policies. Abul Fazl explained that the empire was divided into provinces called Subas. So he divided his empire into provinces, that means Subas, governed by a Subedar who carried out both political and military functions. Suba means here a land that lands rights who gets, that's a Subedar. He carried not only military functions but political functions also, political and military functions. Each province also had a financial officer or diwan. So to these Subas, a financial officer will be there. What was the name of him? It was Diwan. For the maintenance of peace and order in his province, the Subedar was supported by other officers. The Subedar was supported by other officers, such as military paymaster. Military paymaster was called as Bakshi. The minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage, he was Sadar. And military commanders were called as Fauzdars, and the town police commander Kotwal. So all these officers, Bakshi here, Diwan financial officer, and Bakshi military paymaster, and religious and charitable patronage Sadar, Fauzdars and Kotwal. All these officers helped to Subedar in administering that Subas. Next, Noor Jahan's influence in Jahangir's court. Okay, here Jahangir's wife Noor Jahan. Okay, how he influenced Jahangir's court? Let's see. Mehrun-Nisa married the Emperor Jahangir in 1611. Actually, Jahangir's wife named Mehrun-Nisa. In which year he married? In 1611. And received the title Noor Jahan. So, after getting married, she got the title Noor Jahan. She remained extremely loyal and supportive to the monarch. So, she proved herself a good wife to her king, Jahangir. As a mark of honor, Jahangir struck silver coins bearing his own titles on one side and on the other the inscription struck in the name of the Queen Begum Noor Jahan. So, for honoring her wisdom, what the king has done, he minted silver coins. On one side of the coin, his own titles. What were the titles he has received for his ruling? Those titles one side, and on the other side, this was mentioned. What was there? Struck in the name of the Queen Begum Noor Jahan. On the name of Noor Jahan, he minted those coins. That also mentioned. That means he has that much respect on his wife Noor Jahan. The adjoining document is an order of Noor Jahan. Farman. The square seal states command of her most sublime and elevated majesty Noor Jahan Padshah Begum. Okay, on stamps and seals also there on the name of Queen Noor Jahan, he asked the ministers to prepare seals. The round seal states by the son of Shah Jahangir, she became as brilliant as the moon. May Nur Jahan Pasha be the lady of the age. So, and there are two types of seals. One is round seal and other one is square. Square side, square type seal. So, on the square seal states this mentioned command of her most sublime and elevated majesty Nur Jahan Padshah Begum, and the round seal states by the son of Shah Jahangir she became, that means under the shade of Shahanshah Jahangir she became as brilliant as the moon. That means he has appreciation for her lady, okay, Nur Jahan. So that much importance he has given to her wife Nur Jahan. Next, Akbar's nobles commanded large armies and had access to large amounts of revenue. So here Akbar's nobles, they commanded large armies. They have made big armies and had access to large amounts of revenue. While they were loyal to the empire, functioned efficiently, but by the end of the 17th century, many nobles had built independent networks of their own. At the beginning, they were loyal to emperor, but afterwards, by the end of the 17th century, what they have done? They have made their own networks and they used that revenue for their own. Their loyalties to the empire were weakened by their own self-interest. That means they misused those revenues and made for their purpose. While Akbar was at Fatehpur Sikri during the 1570s, he started discussions on religion with the ulama. Ulama means religious preacher. Brahmanas, Jesuit priests who were Roman Catholics and Zoroastrians. That means with all the religious heads, he started discussions. These discussions took place in the Ibadat Khana. Ibadat Khana. That means for all these religious matters, he has allotted a building. That building was Ibadat Khana. He was interested in the religion and social customs of different people. Akbar's interaction with people of different faiths made him realize that religious scholars who emphasized ritual and dogma were often bigots. Their teachings created divisions and disharmony amongst his subjects. So, here of course he was illiterate, but he used to discuss with all types of religious people and what these religious teach. He want to know from these scholars. But at the end, what he had got the opinion, dogma, who emphasized ritual and dogma were often bigots. But that means there was, their teachings created divisions and disharmony amongst his subjects. That means not all the religious, those teachings were different and they created divisions and disharmony amongst his subjects. This eventually led Akbar to the idea of sul-e-kul or universal peace. So he was not interested in that and he lost his faith on those ideas. That's why he emphasized on universal peace, sul-e-kul or universal peace. This idea of tolerance did not discriminate between people of different religions in his realm. Instead, it focused on a system of ethics, honesty, justice, peace that was universally applicable. So, in his universal peace, sul-e-kul, what he given importance, what the ideas, honesty, justice and peace. Abul Fazl helped Akbar in framing a vision of governance around this idea of sul-e-kul. So, to create this idea, who helped him? Abul Fazl helped him. This principle of governance was followed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan as well. So, the next descendants also, who Jahangir and Shah Jahan also followed Akbar's policies and this universal peace to create equality among his people. Next, sul-e-kul. Okay, here they have given in the box very briefly. See children, Jahangir, Akbar's son, described his father's policies of sul-e-kul in the following words. As in the wide expanse of the divine compassion, there is room for all classes and the followers of all creeds. So, in his imperial dominions, which on all sides were limited only by the sea, there was room for the professors of opposite religions and for beliefs, good and bad, and the road to intolerance was closed. So, here what he was saying, here in this room, in his religion, all were treated equally. Okay, for all the religions, there was a room for the professors of opposite religions and for beliefs, good and bad, and the road to intolerance. That means, if anybody is not interested in or not believing others' religion, means for them the road was closed. That means all should respect all religions. Sunnis and Shias met in one mosque and Christians and Jews in one church to pray. He constantly followed the principle of universal peace. So he asked all the people, these Sunni, in Muslims only Sunnis and Shias, two categories na. So they used to meet in one mosque, and Christians, they have to go for only one mosque, and Christians and Jews, they here also Romans and Catholics, these also will go to only one church. That means he consistently followed the principle of universal peace. All are equal, all should get peace, all should believe in honor, faith, justice, like that. So this is the said by Jahangir about his son, about his father's policies. Next, the Mughal Empire in the 17th century and after. So, in the 17th century, how was the Mughal Empire, and after what happened? Let's see. The administrative and military efficiency of the Mughal Empire led to great economic and commercial prosperity. International travels described it as the fabled land of wealth. So, the travelers who has visited this Mughal Empire, they described this as fabled land of wealth. That means this land was filled by wealth, a very good land. But these same visitors were also appalled at the state of poverty that existed side by side with the greatest opulence. But they have found that there are so many rich, and by their side only poverty is also there in this kingdom, like that they have explained. The inequalities were glaring. Documents from the 20th year of Shah Jahan's reign inform us that the highest ranking Mansabdars were only 445 in number out of a total of 8,000. So, in 8,000 Mansabdars, highest ranking were only 445. This small number, a mere 5.6% of the total number of Mansabdars, received 61.5% of the total estimated revenue of the empire as salaries for themselves and their troopers. That means from 8,000, only these 445 members got nearly 61.5%. That means whatever the revenue amount they have collected, in that 61%, if these 445 are getting as salaries, means what about remaining 7,500 members? So that means only these 445 were rich people, and besides these 7,500, they were in poverty, we can say that. Okay. Next, the Mughal emperors and their Mansabdars spent a great deal of their income on salaries and goods, and at the same time, here Mughal emperors and Mansabdars spent their income on salaries and goods. This expenditure benefited the artisans and peasantry who supplied them with goods and produce. But the scale of revenue collection left very little for investment in the hands of the primary producers, the peasant and the artisan. So, here they have spent on the salaries and goods. That means here Mughals were interested in buying things from the artisans. The poorest amongst them lived from hand to mouth, and they could hardly consider investing any additional resources. That means all these artists, farmers, they have spent their lives in only small income. Tools and supplies to increase productivity. The wealthier peasantry and artisanal groups, the merchants and bankers profited in this economic world. That means on these kings and queens, in what they are interested, for them only they spent money, but remaining other artists and they spent in poverty. The enormous wealth and resources commanded by the Mughal elite made them an extremely powerful group of people in the late 17th century. As the authority of the Mughal emperor slowly declined, his servants emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions. So, by the late 17th century, slowly these Mughal empire faded out. They constituted new dynasties and held command of provinces like Hyderabad and Awadh. So, by the time what his generals they have done, they emerged. His servants emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions. So, in those their local regions, they created for their kingdom. They created their own kingdoms. For example, Hyderabad and Awadh. Although that means Subedas and commanders, they declared themselves as kings there. Although they continued to recognize the Mughal emperor in Delhi as their master, by the 18th century the provinces of the empire had consolidated their independent political identities. Of course they declared, but they declared as Samantas. But by the 18th century they declared themselves as independent kings to Hyderabad and Awadh like some others. We will read more about them in chapter 10. Okay, so about these independent kings and their political identities you will read in chapter 10. And here small box given children, see, kings and queens. There were several great monarchs, all near contemporaries in different parts of the world in the 16th century. These included the ruler of Ottoman Turkey, Sultan Suleiman 1520 to 1566. During his rule, the Ottoman state expanded into Europe, seizing Hungary and besieging Austria. His armies also seized Baghdad and Iraq. That means to west side, this kingdom expanded. Much of North Africa, all the way into Morocco, acknowledged Ottoman authority. Suleiman also reconstructed the Ottoman navy. Its domination over the eastern Mediterranean brought the navy into competition with Spain. In the Arabian Sea, it challenged the Portuguese. The monarch was given the title of Al-Kunani, the lawgiver, because of the large number of regulations passed during his reign. These were aimed to standardize administrative procedures throughout the expanding domains of the empire and specifically to protect the peasantry from forced labor and extraordinary taxes. Later, in the 17th century, when public order declined in the Ottoman domains, the reign of Suleiman Kunai was remembered as a period of ideal governance. That means about this king, how he has ruled west side, how he has given importance to peasantry and proved himself as the period of ideal governance. That means he got the belief of the peasantry and his people. Find out more about Akbar's other contemporaries, the ruler of England, Queen Elizabeth, the Safavid ruler of Iran, Shah Abbas, and the more controversial Russian ruler, Caesar Ivan IV Vasilyev, also called Ivan the Terrible. So, about these people also you have to know. Here, this is a suggestion, children. So, this is the end of the lesson. Thank you. I hope you understood the content, children. Thank you. Have a nice day.